Okay, well, good afternoon. I hope you've been having a good start to the conference. Silent. Oh, nodding. Thank you. I like nodding. Okay, well, I won't get in the way. Let's kick off this session. And I'm delighted that we're going to start off with John McCormick from PwC. He works for the global L&D group there. And John has, from our discussions and from the work that we've done prior to this conference, I've discovered quite a unique perspective, very refreshing, on designing learning. He was originally a management consultant and subject matter expert for 20 years within the business. However, he discovered that it was far more fun to actually develop the learning than it was to just contribute to it in his spare time. I give you John McCormick. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So, the last thing you probably need after lunch is another Australian telling you, Poms, that there might be a better way of doing something. But I'm sure you'll survive. Eddie's going to try and do it with your rugby team, so we'll see how that goes after the weekend. Anyway, let me just take you on a bit of a journey here. During 2014, I decided to have a go at doing some e-learning development. Probably at that time was the first time that the tools that were around that would enable you to do this sort of thing in this sort of way. Probably before that it was a lot more difficult. So during 2014 I developed an e-learn about culture in our financial services organisations for our FS team. Now, of course, culture in FS organisations, not two words you expect to find together in the same sentence. But anyway. Bank bashing, it's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Right. So, they already had a story that they wanted to tell. Now, you'll hear me talk a lot about storytelling, but it was important that they had the story. Now, they didn't develop this story as a piece of e-learning development. They developed that story as a piece of thought leadership. But it was a very thoughtfully put together story about that's what they wanted to tell in a piece of learning. So the two things that I did to try and bring it to life is to get some narration from an expert to bring it to life. So this is about getting a subject matter expert to help out. So I had a very energetic and passionate and knowledgeable lady called Rachel who helped me out with this, and she did two things. One is that she played the role of the host, the narrator, like any good nature documentary, the David Attenboroughs, the Benedict Cumberbatches, the Samuel Wests. They make a living out of that these days. So we had the concept of a narrator to bring this to life. And that's what Rachel did, is that she played the role of the narrator. So in terms of bringing some multimedia into that, is that she was quite happy once we got the scripts together of what she needed to do. I said to her, you go away, you record it on your phone with the standard software that comes on your phone, and you email them to me. And that's exactly what she did. And that was a very simple process. Secondly, she was also really good at being able to ambush people in the corridors or in their offices about, David, right? You're the regulatory expert in our organisation about what the FCA and people like that do. They're really serious about this, the FCA. Tell us about why the FCA is serious about this and why our clients in the bank should take this seriously. And then she walked into his office, said, David, talk for 1 minute. So he talked for 1 minute and 9 seconds, a very powerful piece of micro thought leadership about why the banks are taking this, the regulators taking it seriously, and why the banks should take it seriously. And then it's in the can, she just emails it to me. So we were able to put together a large number of pieces of video, a large number of pieces of audio, integrate into that to bring that story to life. So we cut 11 iterations of that e-learn in less than a month. And they were really happy with it. They said, it's really forceful, it's really lively, and you developed it so quickly. So I thought, aha, there's a thought. Let's try it, maybe on a slightly bigger scale. Another part of our business, the forensics competency that I look after. We also did a global workshop in February of last year with a whole bunch of territories put together. This time, we didn't actually have a story. So we had to develop the story before we could actually start cutting the code. So we actually developed 3 storyboards in that meeting. What became eLearns 2 and 3 that I'll talk to you about in a minute. eLearn 1, which is the one that we started to build in that workshop, on the beginning of day one, that story did not even exist. We had an idea about what a curriculum we were going to use. We had eLearn's storyboards 2 and 3 already in our minds. And all of a sudden, we figured out halfway through day one that there was a gap that we hadn't thought about. So we had to build a story for eLearn 1. We started that on the Monday afternoon. The eLearn developers came into the room Tuesday afternoon. By the end of Wednesday, we had half of that eLearn done. About 25 screens with multiple layers, say 80 layers of content. We had that about 50% done in 3 days. And then we let them out of the room. And as part of this learning process, we didn't really have a process for capturing the waves that came after that. Very sadly, it was 50% done in 3 days. As soon as we let them out of the room, the other 50% took us another 5 months. There's a learning lesson for us. We had to have a process for capturing the content once we got them out of the room. But the process worked. Eventually, when we got that eLearn out, it was a very useful exercise. The subject matter experts were astonished about how much they were able to get done in that 3-day period. We cut 45 pieces of video in 3 days. We cut 3 storyboards. We did 50% of one eLearn. So we thought, that works pretty well. Let's crank it up even more. We had the storyboards for eLearn 2 and 3, so we decided to build eLearns 2 and 3. We got them back in the room. We had a process for these rolling waves, the sprints as they call them in the Agile world, that we had this process of virtual meetings using WebExes, a face-to-face meeting, and then some more virtual WebExes. So we created another 2 eLearns, eLearns 2 and 3, about 200 layers of content. We cut another 15 pieces of video. We created about 40 CPE questions for the US because they need that for their process. In the second month of that 2-month period, we created and tested about 300 testing issues, about 110 in eLearn 2, 190 in eLearn 3. So that thing, we cut 2 eLearns, started beginning of July, we released them in early September. So we scaled it up and it still worked, and it worked well.
Internal controls are obviously important. However, we need to understand how they work and what the weaknesses of internal controls are.
You get a bunch of subject matter experts in a room, they forget about the camera after a certain period of time, and they talk about what they know, because they're good at that stuff. People like talking about things that they know. So we covered some serious issues, and they did it well. After they'd got used to the cameras and being able to cut these videos, they got even more inventive.
Sometimes when you're running an investigation, you have to think like a criminal. You know you want to.
They didn't even tell me that they cut that video. They just snuck away and did it. A really, really funny video. Because of course we all like to laugh and it helps us learn. So the subject matter experts really got into this sort of thing. Why did we do it that way? One of the things is that I've always had sort of this thing about a functional specification or a story has got to be locked in place and it's never going to change. I certainly don't think that's true now, and you know what? I don't think it's ever been true that the story that you want to tell never changes. Because this business and IT don't understand one another, all this sort of stuff. The business user can't always tell what it's going to look like. So one of the other things about this Agile approach and the prototyping is that they can actually do content review and look and feel review at the same time. And we can roll it through. You want to change it, let's try it, let's see how it goes. And the reason that you can do that now is these new tools that are around allow us to do this rapid testing. It really is quicker if we want to try something to actually put it in and try it rather than spend a whole lot of time agonising about whether it's a good idea or not. Put it in, see what it looks like. If it doesn't work, change it, dump it, do something else. Okay? And you can test, as I said, functionality and look and feel at the same time. We can also capture and integrate the video and audio at the same time. And the subject matter experts were really good at that, in being able to say, yeah, I think to bring it to life, I'd do a video here. And they could actually do that as part of the storyboarding process. One of the things that you might be thinking is that there is a risk of taking all this handheld indie-style video that you might not get it right. And there are some cases when we didn't get it right. We cut this piece of video in one of our meetings.
Hi everyone. So the question being posed is, what is...
Sounded all right on the camera. We had it against a nice bright wall. But what we didn't realise until we got it out is that the traffic roaring past on Southampton Road, just down the road, was this deafening background racket. And we thought, fine, we'll just do it the next day. Unbeknownst to us, at 2 o'clock in the morning, this gentleman from New York gets a call from his missus saying our son's just been raced to hospital for an emergency operation. He goes out to the airport, gets on a plane, and he's back in New York. He's gone. So what do? We get it off the camera, strip the audio out, took the background noise out, and then put it back in.
Hi everyone. So the question being posed is, what is...
The background noise is gone. So we used the video. It's fine. So the message of that is, try and get the video right, and there are some guidelines on video, get it in the background, keep the background noise down. But if you don't get it right, a lot of the time you can fix it. Try it, fix it, don't agonise over it. So what are the benefits we found from that approach? One of the things we found when we first got the subject matter experts in the room, a lot of people said, I don't know whether I could do these videos. Once we got them started and they became comfortable with it, as I said, we cut 45 videos in 3 days. At the end, we were beating them off with sticks. All right? Oh, I just want to cut a video. I just want to tell you about something else. They were really comfortable with it towards the end. One of the other things is that they're also really good in saying, how would you actually test the learner's knowledge? They were really good at building quizzes because they know from engagements, if I've taught somebody that on my job, how would I know whether they've actually learnt it or not? Is that I would ask them these questions. They were really good at creating engaging quizzes. And they're good at telling stories. That's what subject matter experts do. If you let them tell stories, they'll tell really engaging, powerful stories. And they had fun. And they said it's the most fun they've ever had working on these jobs. They enjoy it, and you can tell. They also create some really interesting videos. We have one of these from one of the global leaders. We wanted to get him to do an introduction for it. He lives in Austin, in Texas, and his main client is in New York. And he's just shuttling back and forth all the time. So we could never get him into the studio. We tried to do the old school traditional approach and it just didn't work. We had a script for him and we eventually said, oh, for heaven's sake, Mike, why don't you just film it on your iPad?
As you can see from this video, I'm on the road and busy like everyone else. So busy, in fact, I couldn't manage to get myself to the studio to record this. The success of the framework will depend upon practitioners using it and refining it.
What he did, he hired a rickshaw to go around Central Park. I didn't show you one bit. He looked like he filmed it in Lexington Avenue, and he also filmed it in the departure lounge at JFK. Now, sure, it's indie-style video, and he's filming himself on his iPad, but the point is that it was very powerful. Everybody who saw it said, he's made the effort. I didn't even have time to get into the studio, but I made the time to let you people know that I think this is important and that you should do this learning. And they said, you know what? That's Mike. That's what he's like. It was much more powerful than a dull, boring old white man in a suit against a corporate backdrop. So, how did we go about doing this? Let's talk about the process. Those of you who need a methodology, there's the methodology. It's called the bendy snake methodology. It's an offshoot of Agile. It has some general principles. Mobilisation, just get the roles right. Their role is to tell stories. And what we said was, rather than use the L&D speak like learning objectives and key learning points, we had this topic thing called topics, question, answers, and it was very powerful. When you're telling your story in your book, how many chapters are in the book and what are the chapters called? What are the topics that you're going to cover? In each chapter, what are the questions that you should be able to answer when you've been through this learning, or even better, that you could ask the client to start a conversation? And of course, what are the answers? Topics, questions, answers. If the material doesn't relate to that, what the hell is it doing there? So they can build a good story. Stories are crucial. You work top down, try not to work bottom up. Be ruthless about the alignment. Topics, questions, answers. If it doesn't relate to that, what's it doing there? And once the story's right, that's great. Spend as much time as you need on the story to get it right. Because once the story's right, this process works really well. If the story isn't right, you're going to struggle, but you'll struggle in Agile or Waterfall or whatever process you like. If the story's not right, bad things will happen. Get the story right. We did face-to-face for our kickoff, no substitute for face-to-face. You may be able to do it virtually. Iterate. Run as many prototypes as you need. Analyse the gaps, fill. You can probably spend more time agonising about whether to do something or not than just bang it in, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, strip it out. And you can test. Iterate, test. Fill the gaps, test. With the tools that are available nowadays, you can do that stuff. Don't be afraid to do lots of iterations, but the key thing is know when to stop, because you can go forever. And the process could consist of a number of subsets of that life cycle. So, as I said, get the story right. People love telling stories. Just rip them out of their heads, right? They love that stuff. Make sure you set the meeting up. Face-to-face is a crucial component of it. Get it right. Get them in the room. Script them to a certain extent, but don't agonise over the scripts. As I said, audio, video, try to get it right. The tools nowadays in things like iPhones are just fabulous. It's very hard to stuff it up. Maybe oversubscribe the number of subject matter experts you need, because you will lose some. But the other thing that's important is get them to trust one another, because if one of them isn't there, we had a lot of situations where if Fred from the US has said that, then they were cool with that because they trust that person. Respect the developer's turf, but maybe have some development skills yourself. That's always useful. In our case, we got this thing right to the end. The developers handed it over, and all of a sudden I figured out I spelt one of the subject matter experts' names wrong. So I just changed it myself. Don't overthink it, have some fun. Whoop. We're done here. That's an Agile summary of our Agile approach. It was not 90%, probably 30, 40% video. We probably had a dozen, 15 videos in there. We use video for people to tell stories. Like, it's much more powerful than audio for that.
When you were doing the other interactions, did you sit there with them and type questions?
We did it a number of ways. One way that we found really good is the subject matter experts interviewed one another. So you have a topic where you're going to have, say, 4 or 5 questions, and they ask each other those questions and then swap round, so you can cover that off as well. The other way we did it was a panel discussion. And once again, you have some questions. You can either have one of the subject matter experts chair it, or possibly we could chair it, and you ask questions, they answer them, and in some cases we chopped them up and built some e-learning that said, here's 5 questions on the left-hand side, and when you clicked on it, you saw the 2-minute answer. So we took a 10-minute video, cut it down into 5 2-minute chunks that answered specific questions. So it's sort of scripted, but it looks like it's very natural because you just edit out the dull bits.
Okay, the gentleman there.
Yeah, you kind of semi-answered that question. So, sort of double question really. So how, first of all, do you get people comfortable with doing the video? And B, then, after you've edited it, do you do some kind of assurance with them to make sure they're happy with the output?
There are some people who are not going to be comfortable with this approach, and there's nothing you can do about that. Our experience has been that the majority of them, when we were filming them talking about their stories, they forgot that the camera was there. Because nowadays, we're not talking great big cameras like that one, we're talking these, right? So they just literally forgot that it was there. we didn't typically feed back to them about assurance of it, because we never actually changed what they said. All we did was cut out the dull bits. So we never actually said, you know, cut out the word not when I said I'm not in favour of something, cut the not out or anything like that. We never actually structurally changed it. If we had of, then yes, I would probably fling it back to them for a review. Yep.
I know you said earlier that there's lots of tools available. Can you shine some light on the ones that you specifically prefer?
The ones that we work with, we have a corporate license for Articulate Storyline, was the major one that we used. And we used very simple audio and video editing tools that are free, things like Audacity, I don't know, things like Microsoft Movie Maker. Very simple things. They're not going to let you do sophisticated things, but for a video that's got some ums and ahs and false starts, it's literally clipping them out.
And on the mobile device, or the iPhone?
The iPhone, we are literally using the standard software that comes with it, the voice recorder software, because the quality of that is really quite good. If you're reading out a script with your phone there, the quality is perfectly acceptable.
Are you open to other people in your organization this approach, like someone wants to share some knowledge to
Yeah. Well, certainly the subject matter experts, if they felt there was someone better somewhere else, they just went and grabbed them, like Rachel did on the first one we did. She tracked down our regulatory expert and ambushed him in his office and said, talk to me for a minute about why the regulators are serious about this. And he's a senior guy. A minute of him is very powerful.
That's why we are exploring the possibility for us to have a very simple authority tools straight from the OMS
Yep.
to allow anybody in the company to
Yeah.
produce with guidelines those modules, to send them to a supervising committee that validates in data.
Yeah.
And then to have them online and maybe select the best model or
Yeah.
something like this. Because we really believe in this sharing of knowledge.
I think if you give them a structure, like that structure of topic, question, answer, they just implicitly understood that. How many chapters in your book? What questions should you answer? What would the answer be?
But you haven't tried yet to have people doing it themselves.
No, we've tended to facilitate it, but in theory, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do some of this themselves. It's like direct to video, perhaps. Like to have videos as a piece of, rather than a piece of e-learning, just have a narrated video. As long as it tells a good story. The key to it is tell a good story, as it has been for thousands of years. Tell a good story.
Thank you. And I think that was fantastic, John. Thank you. I think there's a lot to think about in what John's had to say, and I really like this very quick and dirty, no detriment intended, but this very quick and dirty approach to just get them in a room, get it done kind of approach that you've taken with Agile. So thank you very much for sharing. There'll be time for you to have more questions with John later.